it's a pleasure for me to present Dr. Ivo Grigorov from the Technical University of Denmark. He's an enthusiast advocate of open science and the open science approach, and he's committed through Foster and Foster Plus projects in the training of open science aspects, and he will then talk now about open science and the methodologies to put it into practice. Igo, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. It always sounds better when someone else says it. Thank you for attending. You make a vital part of the event. This is me. For the next 40 minutes, I like you to think of me as a cartoon. It doesn't matter who I am, what I've done. It doesn't matter what I'm wearing. It's irrelevant. I am just a tiny physical manifestation of a couple of communities. And like all good things, they have their own logos, and this is what they look like. Whether you know them or not, it doesn't matter. The point is that this is where my wisdom comes from. And it's going to be one of my messages for today, is that community is important. And I'm also going to steal a couple of messages from Louise's talk, and I want to reiterate that values are important. And how are we going to redefine our own personal values of why we do the research we do versus how we are measured what we do, and how we're going to leverage that together with a community that thinks like us, how we're going to leverage that to address societal challenges and change research and innovation, but also change ourselves, right? What can we do? Change starts, Michael Jackson says it, look in the mirror. Change, if we want to change a system, we got to start doing something about it, right? And to me, that is the most human, personable, and scalable way of performing change. And open science is a challenge that requires systematic change. So today, if you, when we were trying to design this event in a way that it's somehow demand-driven, we asked you, why are you here? What do you want to get out of it? Right? Just to get a feel, who are you? And what do you need to know? And I'm really encouraged. I've never seen so many questions, so much curiosity, and from a diverse demography. And that is great, but there is a risk that we will fail in the sense that we will try and give you so much information that you will leave today paralyzed what to do next. So if there's two things that you walk out that door with by the end of the day, I'd like you to walk away with two things. I'd like you to walk away feeling part of the community that feeds me wisdom. And the other thing is, I'd like you to question some of your values. Now, the community that we are part of, they're very diverse. They're probably as diverse as you. How many here are current PhDs? A few. How many would classify yourself as early career researchers? There's still a few. Are you just an average senior scientist? Still a few. What are the rest? Are you project managers? Are you librarians? How many project managers? Quite a few. Okay. So I'll try and tweak the content to hit your ears too. My point is this. You are part of the community that feeds me wisdom. We are this diverse. There's literally everything in it. And we come from different disciplines, and we talk different languages, and we have different cultures. And the only thing that unites us is a common value on why we got to do science, right? And ultimately, that is our common language. Open science happens to be the tool that we use. Now, Louisa mentioned sustainable development goals. As I was packing to come to this event, this is what was on the news cycle, right? The European Parliament yesterday voted that we are in a planetary emergency. As a European, I feel very proud of that. As a human, we should be terrified. And the problem is that these challenges that we're facing, the Sustainable Development Goals, they're so encompassing, they're so big, that they require really all contributions. They require knowledge and idea and research to really flow freely. We're not going to solve these huge problems if we create arbitrary barriers for ideas, research outputs, and innovation to flow across disciplines and be reused in unexpected ways. So these are our values for open science. We also need to recruit the next generation of scientists, and we want to make sure that they have the right value. I want you to think back when you were this young and you looked at the moon or a rocket or whatever inspired you to get into science. What was it? What was that core reason why that you got in? It sure wasn't citations, it wasn't Nature papers, and it probably wasn't even tenure, right? It was just deep curiosity to find out, to figure out how the world works, share it with what you've learned with everybody else, and ultimately make the world a better place. Or in this case, save it. So these are the values really we need to go back. And when you engage the open science community, the open science community that really is putting everything that you may find valuable in my mouth, if you go and talk to them, their core values are very simple. This is how they define open science. For them, it's a no-brainer. This is just the way science should have been done, but somewhere on the way of trying to measure our progress and getting research assessed on various indices, we got lost. We lost track of why we're doing what we're doing. So let's go for a journey. Let's take just 3 minutes out. I want to take you on an imaginary journey. Take everything that you know, or little you think you know about open science, and let's put it on steroids and go into the near future. Not so far into the future, just enough time for the few PhD students that raise their hands to reach their mid-career, right? What would the world look like then? I want you to imagine that in that world, nobody's talking about open science because everybody's doing it. It's just literacy, right? Who talks about literacy? We don't have conferences on literacy unless we're trying to fix a problem in a world where literacy doesn't exist. I want you to imagine that the universities consider themselves and pride themselves to be open knowledge institutions, right? And not just on the brochure, not just on a fancy statement on a website, but really through action. And that trickles down to departments and graduate schools. And graduate schools teach this as a soft skill because it's part of rigorous and reproducible science. And nobody talks about it because that's just what we do. I want you to imagine that the future PhD students, they are so data science savvy and are able to perform literature review on a research question simply using text and data mining. I know, maybe it's too much to ask. I want you to imagine that we do all of those things. I want you to imagine that the research assessment structure is not just using two indicators, but a diversity of fair and inclusive indicators. And I want you to imagine, just last one, that by the time our PhDs in this room come to ask for tenure, that the job description of that tenure contract says that you have to have a proven record of open science in teaching it, performing it, and making sure that your own research production is as rigorous as possible. Is that too far to ask? Hopefully by the end of the talk and the day, you'll see that many of those things are not imaginary and we're already on that track. But let's get back to the reality of this event. We always need to start with a definition. So this is a definition. This is a definition that I happen to like lately. It says open science stands for a transition to a new, more open and participatory way of conducting, publishing, and evaluating. So it's going right across the academic process. It is central to this is a goal of increasing cooperation and transparency. Cooperation is something that should resonate with us if transparency feels too far away. We all like to cooperate, collaborate, work with different teams that surprise us. Open science leads to a more robust scientific result, to more efficient research, faster access to scientific results for everyone. All of this should resonate with everything you just heard about what responsible research and innovation is. If it doesn't, I'm just going to go by lowest common denominators. Let's say that it doesn't, this thing should, right? Robustness, rigor, and reproducibility of our research. If we scratch that out, why are we doing what we're doing? And all of this results in a greater societal and economic impact, whether it's done personally or within a group or by the institutions that we work for. So this is again, you could see, I didn't invent this. This is coming from this hazy community that I presented to you earlier on. But don't take our word for it. We are advocates. We are bound to be less than impartial. Here is a Twitter hashtag that we have used for a number of years now. In fact, I believe it was started by one of the speakers later in the program. And this is basically people like yourself, from the PhDs to the senior researchers and the administrators and the project management and librarians in between, expressing why they do what they do in an open way. And it's interesting to read because then you see real faces, real humans, not just funded jargon on why we should do this. And they will tell you why they do this. And they will tell you that through being open, through sharing their data and code and publications, they've met so many collaborators and they participate in so many projects that wouldn't have materialized otherwise. One way I want you to think about this is, again, I'm stealing an idea from the community. If you've never heard of this book, I encourage you to read it if you're new to the topic. What this well-known physicist says is that all of the research is useful, and that's how the funders think. The problem is that along the way of trying to match some criteria for research evaluation or get that tenure, there's only so much time we can put into documenting the full fruits of our work. So, he argues, only some of it ends up being published. Publishable probably is the wrong word here. All of it is now publishable through the philosophy of open science. But only some of it makes it into a journal. And even then, only some of it is accessible. I believe globally we are now at just about 50% of the publications that you guys create are accessible to the public outside this door. And bodies like the European Commission celebrate that. You could also look at it another way. We are failing. Only half, only one in every second paper you publish is accessible. So how does that speed up flow of ideas and reuse of ideas, and how does that speed up research and innovation towards solution of societal challenges that are really time-pressing? None of this would be known, and it's also an old discussion. How good is the impact factor? You probably know it wasn't designed for the purposes it's being used, and it has some negative consequences. Just this month, an organization that is the European Universities Association, is the voice of higher education, also reiterates this statement. And when you take all of this into account, you have to ask yourself the question, what does this mean for our own credibility as a research community, and what are the consequences for societal impact? Now, when I do these exercises with some of the researchers back home, I'm in an institute which deals with climate and marine science and fisheries. I like to do an exercise, and I'd like to offer this exercise to you. We don't have to spend too much time on it, but it goes something like this. The first thing I ask our guys that are either willing to understand open science or they want to integrate it into their next research grant or research project is this. What are the outputs of your research, and do you consider them all publishable? Right? Most of them instinctively come up and say peer-reviewed publications. I challenge you, give me more. And unless we can reach a shopping list of 15 items, we're not trying hard enough, right? So just for fun's sake, what do you think underpin the most visible part of your research, which is the peer-reviewed publication? What else is there as output, as items that could be useful? Is data useful?
Software.
Research software is useful. Even in data, you could have several layers of data. Experimental, observational, primary, secondary data products. The metadata for each is separate. It's different from that of research software. What else could be useful? Protocols? Methods? Is that useful? In fact, in 2011, if we do this exercise, we will reach a list of 15 eventually. And that changes the way one designs the impact of a research proposal or a research project. Because you're now not focusing just on producing papers and making them visible, but you're saying there's a whole lot of value under the paper that we're not looking into. And in 2011, there was a study by the Research Information Network, and what they did is they made, first of all, a full list of what research produces. And they went to the private sector and they said, is this all useful to you? And they gave their answer with various degrees of usefulness. And the second question was, do you get access to all of the things you consider useful? And the answer was almost always no. So we create, through our desire to go fast and produce the next paper, we cut corners and we inherently create these arbitrary barriers for all of the value that we produce as researchers to be reused by the private sector. And that's where societal value is captured, commercialized, monetized, or simply put to good use at a scale. Now, let's say that we reach this list of 15 outputs. Now you have to manage them. What are you going to do? There's only so many hours in the day. So do we have the actual tools, and are they structured? One of the questions when we were polling, what do you guys want to get out of this? I think one of you said, I like the concept, I'm with the concept, but it just feels too hazy, too cloudy, and too unstructured. And you're right. From the outside, you're right to think that. So can we answer that question in a structured way? Again, I'm going to rely on this community that I was trying to talk to you about earlier. Here are two champions of open science, and they're from Holland, librarians. And this is the blog they run, and if you want what you're about to see, this is where you would find it. What they have done is they have basically went out and tried to answer this question, and they have surveyed over 400 tools that average researchers use at various stages of the research process before they reach the penultimate Nature paper or whatever your target is. And they've tried to measure the degree of openness for each tool, or the degree to which this tool could help you achieve a more open output at that level. And it all starts with a grant. Now, to many disciplines, giving them a platform that allows them to share a grant is crazy. We don't share grants because that's where we think our competitive edge is. There's at least one project I know that's highly visible that you just heard about on the last 10 slides, which actually does that, right? And more do. This particular platform, this is actually a commercial journal, open access journal, which specializes in documenting, publishing the full range of outputs of your research, starting with the proposal grant. This is not dogma. We're not saying you have to do this. but the tool is there should you feel the moment is right in your discipline. Then it goes to sharing the references and the bibliography of the literature review that you might have done in kicking off this project. And here is another tool. And so it goes on. And it goes through hypothesis, and it goes through pre-registration of research if you're doing clinical and biosciences. And it goes through basic data. What are the platforms available there for sharing data? And if you zoom into that, you will see that you could actually choose metadata for different types of data, from primary to secondary and so on. Sharing code, we already mentioned, and for those that share code, the platforms are not new. Then there's a concept of sharing notebooks, like virtual research environments or just open notebook science. This is where we collaborate virtually before the project and as the project goes on, where all the trials and errors and negative results might go in. Sharing protocols, methods. You tried protocols that led to a dead end. Shouldn't everybody know? I mean, this is together with negative results, this is something that the pharmaceutical companies are trying to collaborate on, even though they're highly competitive and secretive about what they do. Because even they, in their high competition, see there's no point going down dead-end roads, right? Do we do that as researchers? Then there's the collaborative writing tools, which are very accessible. And there's a bunch of others, which I don't fully know, in fact. Sharing preprints, again, it could be highly discipline specific, but a number of platforms. Many journals which actually accept the practice. Another thing that's creeping in is open peer review. What is the damage of anonymous reviews, and can we somehow deal with that by making peer review more transparent and more honest and more constructive rather than attacking weaknesses? Publishing and open access. The next speaker will cover, I'm sure, in depth and with the particularities of the national infrastructures. Using open licenses, of course, if we have 15, shopping list of 15 outputs of your research, they all need to have some kind of a tag of who can use it, how they can use it, and for what purpose. Again, there's a tool for that, which is written by lawyers, and it's supposed to be accessible for you to easily choose what is most suitable for you. And then you have the last shell, if you like, in this big onion, are the platforms that help us communicate, disseminate, and engage the public at large, including two little icons here that might actually help you to put all of the outputs on a single platform and just track who cares about which particular part of your research, apart from the publication paper. And that exercise can be nice. What I have done between 2010 and 2014, I was managing a 7 million euro program, which was on Atlantic marine ecosystems, and we tested some of these tools, okay? And I wasn't an expert at the time. I still don't consider myself expert, but they are relatively accessible to use. And by taking of an average project like this, 4 years and several million, you have too many collaborators, difficult to keep track. If you establish a workflow like this, what you get is, at the end, these tools here, they help you track who is using the white papers, the policy papers, the methods, just the data. And you do come up with interesting things. All of a sudden, you realize that your project is being cited in policy directions that you didn't really anticipate. So, if all of this is overwhelming, if you've never seen all of these little tools and logos, you're excused for panicking and thinking where to start. And again, I would fall back on the community. Louisa mentioned to you, if you have a question and there's no time today, use the Twitter hashtag, put the question there. If we can't answer it, we can find somebody who can. What's more interesting is that there is no stupid question online. Okay? Everybody starts at different level, and I guarantee you, you will find a community that has your headache and that are looking for the solution right now. And those are potential collaborators, and those are people you're going to find common language with. If you find our answers too superficial, too bureaucratic, too not enough, not satisfying, within the social media, if you use the open science hashtags, you will find people who have your headaches, your level of understanding, and your questions will never look stupid. So this is always a good start. Use the community. I know it sounds hazy, but we are definitely, there's a resource that we underuse. If we have to start tomorrow, if I had to point you to just a couple of my preferred or at least current resources for self-learning, here is something that we prepared with Eurodoc. Eurodoc is the European Association of Doctoral Students. We thought, what are the 10 topics that the average young career researcher or PhD might care about on open science but don't know where to start, right? And that was run for their ambassador system, and now they're being released, all 10 topics. And they do cover all of the questions that I saw that you wrote at your registrations, right? So you could take your time, and you could go, and the slides are available, and the speakers are highly accessible, and so are we in the background. Another one is this particular project, which I was a partner in. Again, there is a bunch of e-lessons, let's call them, anything that takes from 30 minutes to 2 hours. You could self-pace, do it on the topic that you care about, and get you a running start there. We also have what we call the Open Science Handbook, which is now translated yesterday it was published in Italian. I believe it's already in Portuguese and in Spanish, available for at least a year. And that also allows you to start at your own pace if you're afraid that your questions will look stupid to somebody, which you shouldn't. And here is another, again, community. This is something called the Open Science MOOC. I believe there's about 1,000 people around the world contributing anything from a minute to a week here and there. And again, the idea is simple. How can we gather all of this collective knowledge, package it into 10 topics, and then produce some kind of a massive online course or resource that you could self-pace and understand to match your needs. Again, I'm going to reiterate this. If you feel shy to ask a question, use the social media. We will definitely find somebody has same headaches as you in the discipline where you're working. Discipline specificity is now important. So if you want a solution that is not just generic, I'm confident we can do something about it. Let's do another exercise. This next exercise is essentially saying, can we introduce open science in the research and innovation system one research grant at a time? And it's underpinned by this hypothesis that if you take research data management done well, and if you apply FAIR principle, which means that all of your outputs, not just data, all of your 15 outputs that we discussed earlier are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, basic principle. And if to that we bolt on open science done well as part of your research method for reproducibility, as part of your impact section for both disseminating the results but also engaging, building an engaging proactive communication strategy, possibly engaging citizen scientists, then could you add a competitive edge to your next grant? Okay? We've run this experiment, and first of all, it's run on the basis of a workshop. We literally find people who are willing to give us their idea and draft, and we hack it, okay? It makes you feel uncomfortable, maybe? The concept is something like this. Most grants in the European landscape anyway require that we do some cutting edge research and dissent but that we put the necessary tools for that research ideas and knowledge to flow to various degree of users. And this all looks very bureaucratic and boring, so why don't we splash some color, right? If we make most of our research questions and research projects centered within the real world, then how do we fill this gap with meaningful tools? So what we are suggesting in this experiment is that how are you going to be credible? How are you going to accelerate the emergence of solutions to societal challenges if your research is locked up in some arbitrary, behind some arbitrary barriers? So we're arguing for 100% access in a way that makes sense, so that you can enhance the transfer of knowledge, ideas, and technology to places where they can be put to good use. And in the process, have a very smart societal engagement and communication strategy that references back to all of your research products and outputs. And we take that and we try and put it in all three sections of your average European grant, and let's see what happens. Now, the most hands I saw was the research managers. So the next few slides are a little bit bureaucratic and boring. I'll try and keep them colorful. How is this relevant to the average proposal? In the excellence part, I'm just going at averages here. This is what might exist inside the template. This is what they might be asking for. And in red, I've basically pinpointed where open science philosophies, tools, and concepts might actually be relevant and useful to integrate in part of the proposal, and methodology is definitely one. If your methodology is cutting edge analytically and technically, but you have zero mention of reproducibility and rigor, where is the validity in that? Right? That's a basic argument, and when we do that, we have a good look at the latest literature published on, is there a reproducibility crisis? In which field? Does it vary between fields? What are the discipline-specific issues? And how are you going to design a research methodology and a project that is immune to that? Right? Very, very, very efficient in terms of space. Research integrity also highly relevant, as you heard. I'm going to ignore the bottom part. So in this part, how do we address it? Here are some of the solutions that we propose to the crazy people that let us hack their ideas already. We're asking them, is data science, data mining, is that relevant to their discipline? Is it a data-intensive discipline? And can we add that as a new skill set? It's always good to acquire a new skill set within a grant. It's viewed very well. Is replication, reproducibility, is that an issue? And can we focus on applying this concept that we already mentioned, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, for which you probably hear later on? Can we make that a guiding principle, not just for the binary 1 and 0 data, but for everything that comes out of your project that is of value to someone in the ecosystem? And again, as I mentioned, we will look at what is the community saying on this issue, and what is the latest in your discipline. Another thing that I find, this is more anecdote than a serious point, there are actually proposals who are being penalized for not mentioning this particular document or paying lip service to something like this that exists nationally or at European level. So one can't take these red buzzwords too lightly. Let's do the same exercise on impact. Again, it's a little bit bureaucratic. What I'm flashing at you again is the template that you might see as an applicant, and this is what they ask for. And in red, possibly the areas where we could use this concept of access to research for transfer and engaging the public. In training, because it's a new skill. This is especially relevant for the Marie Curie innovative training networks, which are basically 15 PhDs, like the young PhDs here, but in a single project, scattered all over Europe. And training there is high key, and if you can package all of these skills as soft skills that will be relevant for making their research more impactful and will make a more rounded researcher, that wins points. For lab to market, I'll visit the IPR, intellectual property rights, later on. For creating awareness, how are we going to be credible to the public? How are we going to gain this trust in the public in science if we're hiding our data? I don't know if in Spain you followed, BBC is now airing the Climate Gate documentary. Basically 10 years ago, the incident with University of East Anglia that was hacked by who knows who. And they found the emails which were incriminating that maybe climate scientists are tweaking and tricking the data to convince everybody that climate is actually changing. So now that's being revisited, BBC is revisiting, and they're asking the question, what have we learned? One of the issues in there is that the skeptics that created the whole climate gate, they were very visible, and they were openly requesting access to data and research software to replicate their own experiments. For various reasons, they were denied. So access to the research that we produce is a solid foundation for our credibility. We have to find a way to share it at the right time and not wait for skeptics to use Freedom of Information Act to ask for it. And what we would do in this case, what we would offer the, our willing guinea pigs is to focus not on research papers, not on results, but on outputs, because that is broader. That strikes right at this whole bubble I showed you earlier, that all of your research is useful, not just the papers in Nature you got in, or a couple of data sets or a model that you wrote, but everything that underpins it is of value. And the way to capture that is focus on outputs and see, can we find the right tool for each output to make it optimally reusable by somebody that we don't know? And that's how we create value, even though we can't predict it. Again, soft skills we mentioned. I'll show you something on this. My imaginary journey earlier finished on the note of, can you imagine getting tenure based on open science track record? That is not imaginary, that is very real. And also understand the synergies and conflicts between disclosure, because this is what this is asking, and traditional intellectual property rights. Sorry, that was the bureaucratic part. Now, some of you are asking at registration, what about these conflicts, IPR? What about them? This is the solution that the European Commission gives you, right? It really is this simple. And if you are scared, if you're in a project that has industrial partners, or you are aiming at a prototype, something that should be commercially protected, there is a way, and most universities know how to do it, right? They don't publish. If they are aiming at a patent, they don't publish prior to that. And that's what this diagram is basically saying. You have these tools, a dissemination plan, a data management plan. You follow them because they tell you what to make public when, in the interest of the project. And we have been doing this for years. It is nothing new. It's just that the jargon became sexy, right? All universities know how to do that. And use your local experts. Use your tech transfers, your patent offices. In some places, librarians are very aware of how to deal with this. You have to use these guys. You can't do research alone in a bubble in your research group. Use the support that is available outside. This is the European Commission solution. So you can imagine if you are on a high-risk project, highly commercializable project, then you would you need to show at the beginning that you have very good knowledge of what of your outputs are going to go for dissemination to the academic community and what outputs are going only for commercial exploitation. And this is the switchboard that decides what goes where and when is it released, right? And I think there will be people wiser than me telling you about what this means. There's another example. We're running a little bit late, so I'm going to skip that one. But if you want to know how Denmark plays with these ideas in a very interesting way, Lego and Velux and a bunch of other companies are actually playing with Danish universities to implement this. We can talk over coffee. So one fear that you might be feeling right now is, first of all, your own research project is your own. You're supposed to give it to some random advocates that will do God knows what with it. How will this be perceived in the evaluation system, right? This is something that people are concerned about. If we talk about this openness and disclosure too much, is that a good or a bad thing? So here is, I'm not going to answer the question. Here is what the evaluators themselves say. We ran this experiment over 4 years, and I think now we are into 100 or so proposals. We have hacked them to various degrees. Some of them we haven't hacked at all. Consider them the control point. This is what they say. I'm going by section, just as I did before. And what you see is quotes directly from the evaluation process. I haven't touched it. This is not my opinion. So in this case, what the evaluators liked is that in the research method, the research excellence, open science is applied to optimize reproducibility. This is great for the one that did it. But as a community, I thought this was what we are supposed to be doing anyway. I mean, be reproducible, right? Whether you use the open science tool or another tool, just be reproducible and rigorous. For impact, this is what I like. Exploitation and dissemination of the project results includes sharing of data, which guarantees the reproducibility. Again, as a community, I thought this is what we should ascribe to. But the evaluators themselves are rewarding somebody for progressively and proactively stating that that's what they'll do. Very good realization of the commercial potential of the project outcomes. The data management plan includes IPR-related issues. Again, there will be an hour on this later on. My message here is don't treat the data management plan as a bureaucratic document that you need to deliver as soon as your project starts, especially if you're looking for European money. Treat it as a tool. It's supposed to be a live tool throughout the project. It's a distribution center. It literally governs what is released when, to whom, to avoid these conflicts with traditional intellectual property rights. And I really push our applicants to not treat it as a separate deliverable document, but to write it into their strategy for handling knowledge management and innovation management. It's an indispensable tool. Last comment, research software is freely available, so at least one gentleman cares about that. At implementation, I only choose one comment because it's highly repetitive. Resources match the ambition. You'll be surprised how many proposals, and I've evaluated a few myself, promise the moon in this part. And there is not a single day of effort or euro spent on that. How are you going to deal with big data issues if you're not an expert in it yourself? And even if you are, how are you going to deal with it without putting time in it, right? So this is where the credibility promising too much completely comes away under your feet. I mean, this is the dry evidence, the evaluators. We don't know who they are. Here are some faces. I like these people. These are coordinators of Marie Curie innovative training networks. These are serious guys, right? Marie Curie, if you don't know, it's so competitive. It's silly competitive. You have to have a 93, most of them, 93 out of 100 score to even be considered for funding. I mean, what do you have to do to get funded on this thing, right? Very competitive. These guys care. When we approached them, they didn't say no. And this is why I asked them, tell me in a way that I can share with everybody else, why do you care so much? And this is what they say, right? These are highly competitive senior researchers looking to start projects with 15 PhDs working on a common issue. Here's another one. This one is probably closer to the heart of this institute. I believe this guy was trying to create a paint, which painted on the outside of the building will generate solar power. He cares about it. This is a highly commercial project, right? With a lot of IPR issues in it. They're not afraid of disclosing the right things at the right time. This one is my favorite. This one is, it's actually a funded project, one of the few that gets funded. This is how life goes. And again, very commercial. The idea of the project is to create a chip, a placenta tissue on a chip, so that medical researchers can perform tests on the tissue when they don't actually have enough tissue. Mind-boggling. I'm not a biomedical person, but the commercial potential of this chip is rather high. And these guys were more progressive than anybody, any of the other guinea pigs we played with, in terms of training the young researchers into reproducibility and open science, disclosing the results of the research in synergy with handling IPR and protecting patents. Right? So now you have some real faces to the dry evaluated commons. Now, I'm almost at the end, and I want to leave you, I want to revisit our imaginary journey earlier on, and I want to leave you with a call for action. What is this call for action? In 2016, there were at least 2 projects that looked to find ways to reinvent research assessment and assess young researchers, on all of us and all of you, on things other than the bibliometrics, how many papers you published or how many patents you submitted. Right? They're looking to diversify through a full range of indicators so they could capture all of your efforts in a fair and diverse way. Some of those projects are coming to fruition, and they're midterm. In 2018, the first universities started recruiting and giving tenure on the condition that you have an open science track record. You remember that statement that we thought was so imaginary an hour ago? Is actually true. I think last year there were 10. Yesterday I had a look at this address. The gentleman from LMU, University of Munich, keeps track of all these tenure applications that require open science. This should be a waking up call to all of us, because we collectively, through our graduate schools, we still train young researchers to publish in Nature. Okay? And not do all the other things that are valuable and create societal impact. So, are we doing them a favor? By the time the graduate students coming out of our graduate schools trained just to publish a Nature paper to succeed, by the time they reach their midterm career, there will be many universities that recruit in a way for which they're not prepared. And here they are. You may recognize some of the logos. It's not the full list. Only last month, the Voice of Higher Education, the European University Association, admits that this is an issue. As long as the researchers are forced to focus on few high-level journals, they will not be able to broaden their focus or even take alternative elements of the research assessment into account. The alternative elements being a bunch of projects running in the background looking for how can we do more fair and just research assessment. And they conclude that it is worth discussing how doctoral schools can best address this. I would argue it is not worth discussing how. It is imperative that they do. This is a critical skill for their own career, and we're not doing them a favor. So this is my call to action. Let's raise awareness on this issue and let's put pressure on our graduate schools to do a better job. Thank you. You're more than welcome to bring questions at the break. I believe we have a 10-minute presentation. Yes?
Thank you, Ivo. No, I'm Pilar Rico. I work at the Spanish Foundation for Science and Technology. I'm going to use my Spanish to talk to you, but I just want to thank Ivo for giving me 10 minutes of his 1 hour slot today to talk to you about the services that we provide from the Spanish Foundation to you researchers and to the whole community of R&D regarding open science policies. La FECID, que muchos de vosotros la conoceréis, es una fundación del sector público que depende funcional y orgánicamente del Ministerio de Ciencia y Tecnología. Nosotros trabajamos fundamentalmente para implementar, diseñar adecuadamente e implementar las políticas públicas de ciencia y tecnología, y concretamente trabajamos en la implementación adecuada de las políticas de Open Science. Ivo me pidió que viniera a esta sesión fuera de programa con el objetivo de que ofreciésemos información sobre qué servicios tiene la comunidad nacional relacionados con acceso abierto y con Open Science, para que tuvieseis un panorama un poco más completo de cuáles son las acciones que está tomando ahora mismo el Gobierno en materia de Open Science. Todo nuestro plan de actuación, el de la FECID, que somos 135 personas trabajando directamente a las órdenes del Ministerio, todo nuestro plan de actuación está destinado a poner en marcha la política de Open Science. Ivo os ha explicado el concepto de Open Science relacionado con el de RRI que os ha explicado antes Luisa, sobre todo desde el punto de vista del investigador que accede a una financiación, especialmente la financiación europea de Horizonte 2020. Y además ese material lo sirve para Horizonte Europe. Pero la visión que tenemos desde FECID es que Open Science modifica los 4 procesos básicos en los que se estructura el proceso investigador. Cambia el modo de financiación, de ejecución, de comunicación y de evaluación de la ciencia, a nivel personal de vosotros investigadores o a nivel institucional. Y nosotros trabajamos en modificar esos parámetros, o bien la financiación o la ejecución o la comunicación o la evaluación, para que cumpla con las exigencias de Open Science. En lo que se refiere a financiación, tenéis a vuestra disposición la convocatoria de ayudas para divulgación de la ciencia que se acaba de abrir, que son 3,5 millones de euros anuales y financian actividades de divulgación científica. Tiene una línea específica que financia ciencia ciudadana, que como sabéis es una de las partes más importantes de Open Science, la ciencia ciudadana. Además, yo concretamente soy el Open Access National Desk, el NOAD, que es una suerte de punto nacional de contacto para Open Access, y el trabajo que desarrollo junto con parte de mi equipo es de explicaros a vosotros, beneficiarios de proyectos de Horizonte 2020, cuáles son las obligaciones a las que os enfrentáis en relación al acceso abierto a publicaciones y a datos de investigación. Cuando firmáis vuestro Grant Agreement, por lo general no nos leemos los artículos que conforman ese Grant Agreement, pero el artículo 29 os pone unas obligaciones muy específicas sobre acceso abierto. Cuando tenemos que reportar o cuando la oficina de proyectos de nuestra institución nos lee el Grant Agreement, por lo general las dudas nos vienen a nosotros y resolvemos esas cuestiones relacionadas con a qué repositorio me dirijo, cómo puedo evitar la APC, etcétera. No trabajamos solos porque trabajamos en colaboración con las bibliotecas universitarias de España, pero en mí y en la FECID tenéis un punto de contacto para resolver dudas específicas sobre el cumplimiento del Grant Agreement. Además, dentro de FECID hay muchos puntos nacionales de contacto, no sé si lo sabéis. Está el punto nacional de contacto de RC, de Marie Curie, de FED, de COST, de SWAPS, de Reto 6, son todos personal de FECID, y además trabajamos en colaboración con los puntos nacionales de contacto que están en CEDETI y en el Instituto de Salud Carlos III. De manera que esa formación de la que hablaba Ivo a los grupos de investigación que están formándose ahora mismo a través de los programas de doctorado, nosotros la aplicamos a los beneficiarios, a los equipos de investigación que o están preparando propuestas, porque les ayudamos en la preparación de propuestas con materiales similares a los que se ha presentado aquí ahora, o también en el cumplimiento de los acuerdos que han adquirido. También representamos a España en el comité estratégico y en los comités de programa, y ahí tratamos de poner un poco de coherencia sobre las políticas que se imponen a través de los programas de financiación de Horizonte 2020 y de las políticas nacionales. Las líneas de trabajo incluyen también divulgación de vuestra actividad a través de la agencia de noticias SYNC, la adquisición de fondos privados para completar vuestra investigación a través de la plataforma Precipita, acciones como la de diplomacia científica, ciencia en el Parlamento, en los campus científicos de verano, FameLab, las unidades de cultura científica. Como digo, la FECID es una institución que está al servicio del Ministerio en primera instancia, pero también al servicio de toda la comunidad investigadora, al servicio de las instituciones y al servicio de vosotros investigadores. Cuando os enfrentéis con una cuestión relacionada con los acuerdos de subvención y las obligaciones a las que estáis obligados en materia de Open Science, el punto nacional de contacto soy yo, y cuando os enfrentéis a actuaciones específicas que queréis desarrollar en el marco de Open Science, como, por ejemplo, actividades relacionadas con ciencia ciudadana, tenéis a vuestra disposición tanto actividades específicas de FECID en las que podéis participar, como también una convocatoria concreta que, como digo, se acaba de abrir y ahora mismo os podéis presentar vuestras propuestas. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Ivo, for sharing your time with me, and thank you to the organization for inviting me at the very last time. Thank you.